Evening, folks. Uper here. Tonight we are going to cover the actions that go with the CMO event system. Now, every event must have a trigger and it must have an action. And this is going to tell exactly what your event does. Now, you can have multiple actions, and this is something good to remember. All of them will fire. All you need is one trigger. You can have multiple triggers, and any one of them will set off the event, but all of the actions will go. So the first one we have is the points action. You must select the side, and then you can determine whether you're adding points or subtracting points. A lot of people use this for the score. You score a certain amount of points for destroying a plane, you lose so many points for losing one of your own plane. A good way to name this is who is gaining or losing in the quantity. When you start assembling large scenarios, it can be kind of time consuming to start digging through all of your different actions to figure out exactly who's losing 5 points or what's happening to the NATO side. Now you can also use this kind of as a memory register to record, for what the AI is doing as a threat level of some sort. Next up, we have the end scenario. There's no settings here. Scenario's over. That's it. Maybe the player has completed the event, or they have reached a points threshold, or a unit's been destroyed. But whatever it is, the scenario's done. This is going to display the scoring, the losses and expenditures, and if you have a closing briefing. That's it. It's all over with. Nothing else here. Be aware, depending on where this is and what other actions are fired, the player may not see whatever other last action you're doing because everything's over. Next up, we have the teleport unit function. And guess what this does? It's going to take some units and it's going to teleport them into an area. It will not do facilities, which means it will not do ground units. So if you have some tanks that you want to move somewhere, this is not how you want to do it. You need at least 3 reference points. Otherwise, you have a line. With 3, you have an area. One thing you can do with this is say you had a bunch of naval units and you wanted to have them pop into a certain area, but you wanted the placement to be random. Say the player had a submarine they had to get out of an area. This will kind of alter that position for each time. Now be really careful using teleport because we don't have teleport in the real world. So if that player is controlling a well-oiled ASW machine and you suddenly put a submarine right in the middle of it, the player is going to feel cheated. You're taking the realism out of the sim and you're putting something that just isn't realistic. It can be used sparingly. I mean, there are times when this is going to happen, but suddenly making a bunch of fighter jets appear in the midst of a certain operational area probably isn't very realistic. Next up is the message. What's the message? This is going to play an HTML message for the player. Actually display, not play. You select who's going to see the message in the text that they will see. Now you can do a lot of cool stuff with this. You can put in images, maps, pictures. You can put hyperlinks in there. Now this is static information. You can't do queries here to pick up things from the scenario itself. Now one thing I use this a lot for is if I'm testing a trigger and I want to know if my trigger is working or if my condition has been met, instead of trying to have all kinds of complex stuff happening, I'll just make a couple of debug triggers that'll just be a message that pops up that says your action fired, and I'll set it on all sides. So if I'm testing multiple triggers and a couple of conditions, then boom, I'll just stack all these together. That way I can know exactly what fired without worrying if another action has a flaw or some other issue with it. Next we have change mission status. This one you'll define the side, you'll pick which mission it is, and you'll set it where it's active and inactive. If it's active and you tell it to go active again, it will just remain active. It won't flip-flop back and forth. Now, one thing that can be really great for doing this is say you have a bunch of units that are all going to kick off at once. Now, you can individually change each mission to determine when it's going to launch or when it's going to stop. But that can be kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. So if you can just use one of these, you can just set up a bunch of these mission status changes and then have one time trigger kick off all the missions. Where this becomes useful is if you want that time to change. Instead of going into all of those missions again and changing it by an hour, all you have to do is change one trigger. Now be aware that if you make a mission inactive, say you have a patrol flight that's out, they will not return to base. They'll just kind of sit there and spin circles until they reach their bingo of fuel, and then they'll go home. So it's one of the things, just be aware that they may not quite do exactly what you think they will do. Maybe that's what you want them to do, but they will not RTB. Now, the last one we have here is the Lua script, and this is definitely the most powerful. This is going to look like a text editor, and it's going to allow you to do pretty much anything that Lua scripts allow. Now, one thing you can do is go over to commandlua.github.io, and you will see all of the special functions that are available to you in the Lua editor. Now, this is a fully functional scripting language. This is not just a tinker toy. I mean, this is professional grade. You can make queries to the database. You can import data. You can export data. You can export Lua scripting. You can load external Lua scripting. You can do comparisons. You can move things around. Almost anything that you can do clicking with your mouse, you can do through Lua. Now, you can make this really, really simple. I'm going to do another video here that's just going to use the Lua console to give you an idea of what you can do. Or you can make this very complex. If you browse to your CMO folder, you'll see another folder in there called Lua. If you click through to that and look at something like Iron Hand or Canary's Cage, click on those folders and you'll see a whole bunch of stuff. And if you really want to get a good idea of what these scenarios can do with Lua, browse through that. It's a fairly easily readable for the player. I mean, you can kind of browse through it and get an idea of what's going on. It's also probably a lot easier than you think it is. And when I say that, you can just kind of learn a few different things on the way that they function, not really even get terribly complex, and do a pretty wide variety of stuff. A lot of these functions just need one line. You can assign unit to a mission. You can add units to a base. You can create an explosion, and it's just one line of stuff, and it's really nothing too terribly difficult. Some of the best places to go look for this, there is a Lua Legion subforum at the Matrix forums. There is a script repository at the Weapons Release Wiki. There is another website called commandops.github.io that run by a gentleman by the name of Wicker that has a really great repository of Lua. But the biggest thing you can do too is if you're playing a scenario and you see something that's cool and you want to see how it's done, you can open up that scenario in the editor mode and go to the Lua folder and piece together exactly how everything works. Now, the little script example we have down below, we've got a unit that we're setting some damage on. It must have done a trigger of some sort because unit X will return whatever unit has set off the trigger. We're creating a fire. We're putting medium damage onto the rudder, and we're damaging a sensor. Then we're checking the range to port. We have a tool that'll detect or that'll let us look what the distance is from that point where the frigate is all the way to an ID for whatever the port unit may be. Then if the range is greater than 200, it's going to fire off and send out a helicopter, and it's going to give the player a message saying that they've dispatched an MH-53. And if it's not, it's going to say, hey, it's too far away and you can't get any of your replacement parts. Now, again, there's more than I can get into in this video. Just be aware that this is very powerful and there's a lot you can do with it. And it's one of the things that can really take your scenarios to the next level. When you can just add a handful of functions and it becomes just, patrols and units, and it can really turn into a work of art.